Good morning, Scallywags. Boo here with another mindless drivel, and I know I'm a little bit late to the party, but today we're gonna talk about Dark Phoenix. Now, this movie has been just universally torn to shreds by practically every critic out there. The kind of universal opinion is that this is the worst X-Men movie ever, and that includes X-Men Origins Wolverine. Also, notoriously in the past, I've made absolutely no secret for my absolute hatred of the X-Men movies. You see, I grew up reading the X-Men, so I hate the movies because the castings are wrong, the stories are wrong. You are aware that the X-Men have other villains other than Magneto, right? And I could honestly do an entire video based solely on how much I hate the X-Men movies and why. So what did I think of Dark Phoenix? Well, I liked it. I can honestly say I enjoyed this movie more than I have enjoyed any of the previous X-Men movies. So with such a reverse statement from what everyone else is saying, how is that possible? Well, let's dive in. To truly get the gist of why I actually enjoyed this movie, we kind of have to rewind a little bit and go into why I don't like the other X-Men movies. And while I briefly touched upon that just a moment ago, let's take a little bit of a deeper look. My two biggest beefs with the X-Men movies kind of have the same level of beefness to them. The first being too much use of the exact same freaking characters. For example, the movie is called X-Men. It's not called Wolverine and some other guys that follow him around sometimes. And while I understand that Wolverine is the most popular out of all the X-Men, blah 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 blah, there are so many other X-Men characters that are just so cool in the comic books and were either completely ignored for the movies, Gambit, or completely wasted on screen, Nightcrawler. But even when it comes to people like, say, Cyclops, a character that most, especially fans of the movies, let alone fans of the comic books, love to hate. Yes, he is a Boy Scout. Yes, he is a kiss-ass to Professor X. He is also one of the finest team leaders in all of comics. He might be a Boy Scout, he might be an annoying character, but when it comes to getting the job done, he gets the job done, and he gets it done well. However, in the movies, he's always just been a little whiny suck-up that's only there to give Wolverine a problem when Wolverine's crushing on Jean Grey. And then, of course, there's the case of Rogue. So, in the first movie, they wanted to give Rogue and Wolverine a father-daughter type relationship. Well, this father-daughter type relationship has happened in the comic books, but it wasn't with Rogue. It was with Jubilee. So why bother taking two characters, Rogue and Jubilee, squashing them together, and then still having Jubilee there anyway? How about you just make Rogue her own character who's actually like the one from the comic books, and then just have Jubilee be a more important character for Wolverine to attach himself to? Speaking of Wolverine, Wolverine is 5'3", a little hairy ball of hate, who only cares about 3 people in the entire world: himself, Jean, and Jubilee. Hugh Jackman is like 6'1", little pretty boy, and the first time I saw him cry in the movie, I was done. And in your first movie, you've got bad guys like Sabretooth, who's notoriously known for these long-winded monologues, and you have him say like 3 words in the whole movie. I could go on and on and on with how much I hate the X-Men movies. My second biggest beef is the casting of those characters, which I kind of touched on just a little bit in that. Pretty much, to sum that up quickly, everyone is wrong. And yes, I'm including Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen in those poor casting choices. Don't get me wrong, I didn't hate them in their roles. Out of everybody, I thought they were probably the best cast, but still not who I would have chose. But probably the biggest flaw of all, not my biggest beef, but the biggest flaw, is the continuity of these movies. That is actually something I enjoy to a certain extent. I don't like it, but it's funny to me. Because the X-Men comics have always been known for having the worst continuity out of any comic book ever. Someone could die and then in the next issue he's back and they never explain why he's back. Stuff like that. It just happens constantly. So for the movies to follow that same kind of terrible continuity is absolutely hilarious. So I'm giving that one a pass. So I get why they did something like Days of Future Past to erase how bad some of the previous movies were. But then we start this whole First Class era. And the First Class era took something that already bugged me about the previous X-Men movies and just multiplied it exponentially. You've got hundreds, literally hundreds of X-Men characters to choose from. Between X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force, Excalibur, I could keep going. So what is the purpose of just completely making up characters for your movie? Every single X-Men movie, with maybe the exception of the first one, has had at least one or two prominent characters never appeared in a comic book once. Completely made up. And I am so far off of where I was going with this, I just started ranting and here we are. In short, why I didn't like the X-Men movies up to date. You've got this enormous cast of characters, but you only really truly focus on 2 or 3 of them at best. Horrible continuity, horrible use of great stories, horrible casting, and horrible performances by many of those cast members, and mistakes so blatantly hated by everyone that you had to completely retcon half of it with a whole new movie. And that brings me up to Dark Phoenix. One of the biggest things that I enjoyed about Dark Phoenix was the cast was immensely scaled down. Even when the party goes out, with the exception of like the beginning of the movie, when the X-Men go out, there's only 3 or 4 of them that even go. You had Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Storm, and Professor X. 4 X-Men, as opposed to 15 people running around and trying to give each one of them a little bit of screen time. You see, the Avengers did the same thing, having a big cast and trying to make sure that each one of them got screen time, and the movie was 2.5 or 3 hours long, versus these X-Men movies that are, you know, a short little 2 hours and that's it. So we actually got to focus a little bit more on character arcs for each of the characters that we did get, and that's a good thing. If your characters in your movie don't have an arc, then there's no point in having a movie. They have to go from somewhere and get to somewhere, learning something along the way. That's how a character arc works. And without it, you're just showing people doing things. You're not actually moving a plot along. And if we never get the time to actually give a crap about our characters, and I mean characters other than Wolverine, Magneto, Professor X, Mystique, or Quicksilver, then there's absolutely no point in having them on screen in the first place. This does that. In fact, the only character that was really there that I feel didn't need to be there, and it was almost as if she was there only to help fight some bad guys, was Storm. One of the most interesting X-Men characters ever is just background noise in this movie. Of course, she was background noise in the last movie. She's in the movie before. Well, okay, so she's always been poorly used. But in this, she was just there for, like, attacky lightning stuff. I think she spoke maybe 3 times in the whole movie. But then you've got characters like Nightcrawler, who I mentioned earlier has been poorly used in the past. We actually get quite a bit of focus on him in this movie. And we actually get to see him just go in straight up murder mode at the end, which was just awesome. Cyclops has been a background character since this whole First Class thing started. But in this, he actually has a purpose and actually connects with Jean. You actually kind of feel their relationship. I think it's a horrible casting choice, but nonetheless, they pulled it off. And everyone's giving Sophie Turner such a bad rap for how she played Jean Grey. I thought she did fine.
When I lose control, bad things happen, but it feels good.
This is a story about a girl who's confused. She has all this rage just building inside of her, and not only does she not understand it, but she also kind of likes it. And that conflict, I thought, actually did come across pretty well on screen. Probably my favorite character arc in this whole movie was Beast. I absolutely loved Beast in this movie. Here's the one time where Beast finally just tells Professor X, you're wrong. Not only are you wrong, but you're kind of being a douche. And even teams up with Magneto to go and fight Phoenix because she feels like she should be killed for killing Mystique. Oh, by the way, spoilers, Mystique dies. And speaking of Magneto, he wasn't overused in the movie. He wasn't a villain in the movie. He actually just helps out the X-Men and has one of the coolest kill scenes in the whole movie. They're like getting attacked by these alien dudes. We'll get to that in a minute. On this train at the end of the movie, and he just like completely crushes the car and with the guy inside of it. It was awesome. But his part in the movie, it felt natural, it felt right, and he played it in a way that was hurt and angry and just, I liked it. Now, having said all of that, there were a few things in the movie that I didn't like, but most of these things were little things and they were few and far between. For starters, I thought the alien story was kind of stupid. The way that the alien story was played out, the way it was performed, the way that it was presented, everything, it was stupid. The biggest stupid thing about it was the explanation of, hey, here's this Phoenix Force, and it has destroyed everything and everyone it's ever touched until you, Jean Grey. And the solution when they can't get Jean Grey to do stuff for them is, okay, well, I'll just take the power off of you. If it's destroyed everything and everyone before Jean Grey, how are you gonna do that? I don't know, but she does it, kind of. The Dark Phoenix Saga is a fantastic story from the comics, and yes, there's aliens involved with it, but not stupid aliens, and it gets kind of weird, so I can understand why they don't go into all of that, but you could have used snippets of it, and not completely made up characters. That sounds familiar. Second on the list of things that I hated about this movie was the continuity that has plagued these movies was all over the place in this movie. Like in the final fight scene, Jean Grey's got this trench coat thing on, and then this guy stabs a thing through her back, and like suddenly the coat just disappears. There's a scene that you've seen in the trailers where Magneto pulls a subway car into a building. Well, it shows that when he's pulling that subway car up, it's filled with people. But the second that it's on ground and goes through the wall, it's empty. Little inconsistencies like that are all over the place in this movie. But the absolute number one thing that I hated about this movie was the leader of the Blue Man group. You see, there's a lot of blue people in this movie, especially at the beginning scene where they go into space. You've got like 6 or 7 people on the X-Jet, and Beast, Nightcrawler, and Mystique, they're all blue, so it stands out. But yes, oh God, Jennifer Lawrence. This movie may have actually made me hate you as an actress. If there has ever been a time where you could tell that someone just did not give a crap about this movie and is only phoning in their performance because they're contractually obligated to do so, it's Jennifer Lawrence in this movie. Every word that comes out of her mouth has 2 effects at the same time. 1, it's completely emotionless and dry and boring. And 2, the stuff that they gave her to say just makes me want to punch her in the face. I'm not gonna get into like the whole SJW thing, you know, stuff like that. And on many levels, I agree with a lot of things that SJW say. The difference being, don't put a thing into a movie just to do that. If that makes any sense at all. There's a scene in the movie where Mystique is going off on Professor X because his ego's kind of getting a little inflated. And when the argument is over, she turns back for one last little jab.
And by the way, the women are always saving the men around here. You might want to think about changing the name to X-Women.
Now, while I would perfectly get on board with an argument that maybe it should be called X-People or something along those lines, the title X-Men came from the 60s, and well, that was just the 60s. Don't force it. As soon as you start to force it or put lines in there like that, of which there's several lines like that in the movie, and every single one of them is completely forced, it loses every bit of power that it had behind it. It's like the scene from Avengers Endgame. The scene where Spider-Man is escaping with the Stark Infinity Gauntlet and gets knocked down, and practically every woman in the movie shows up to save him. I had a conversation about this scene with somebody one night where she said that she felt that it was a very empowering scene. And I can understand that you could get that, and I probably even understand that that's most likely what they were going for with that scene. But had it been mostly women and a guy or 2, it would have still been an empowering scene, and it would have at least made sense. Otherwise, it looks like you intentionally took every female character, having them fighting all these bad guys, and been like, oh, hang on a second, I'll be right back. Let's run over here to save the kid. It causes it to kind of backfire because you forced that scene in there and made it make no sense. The same way you could have done that scene and actually make it make sense would be, you know, a guy moves in to save him and just gets his butt handed to him, and then the girl comes in and just completely lays out the guy who handed the guy his butt, and then hand this guy his butt. What was I talking about? Anyway, don't force things in your movie like that, otherwise you completely destroy the thing that you're trying to say with it. And that was all over the place in this movie. Mostly said by Mystique. So when she gets completely killed 15 minutes into the movie, I was happy, because I wanted her to shut up at that point. Because every single word that came out of her mouth made her sound like a giant. But I digress. Anyway, guys, I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is I liked the movie, other than Jennifer Lawrence. I don't think I made that obvious enough. What did you think of the movie? Put it in the comments below. Continue, as always, to comment, like, share, and please subscribe. One little click, that's all it takes, and you're completely done. And then you get to see all of our videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. While you're out here on the internet, make sure you... Yep. Those are words. Be sure to jump over and check out www.geekycool.com. That is our sponsor, and we in turn are sponsoring them as well. Sort of a partnership, if you will, where you can find articles and top 10 lists and opinion pieces, movie reviews, game reviews, things, exclusive video content, and possibly even a YouTube channel coming in the near future. All things nerd, just like we are right here at Scallywag Productions. So please jump over and give that website your support as well. And again, that's www.geekycool.com. Sorry for all the ranting today. The X-Men is a thing that I rant about, so there you have it. Back to more normal stuff coming up on Friday, so make sure you don't miss out on that. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you soon.